So I wanted to talk a little bit more about kindness because I've been thinking about it a lot, contemplating it a lot. And along with my contemplations on kindness came some contemplations on faith. And so I thought I'd add those in as well. Um, and I wanted to extend a little bit some of the things that I spoke of the last time, last in June. Kindness is really a pretty fierce practice. It can seem not so, but it's a pretty fierce practice. The Dalai Lama, you've heard him say over and over again, my religion is kindness. My religion is kindness. This man who has struggled, he tells us, with anger all of his life. The Dalai Lama has struggled with anger. Yep. He lived through the fleeing of his flight from Tibet when Tibet was annexed by China. It's called the Peaceful Liberation of Tibet by the Chinese government, and the Tibetans call it the Chinese invasion. And in 1950 and 51. And since that time, over 1.2 million Tibetans have been killed. Over 6,000 monasteries have been destroyed, and thousands of Tibetans have been imprisoned. It is said that there are 150,000 refugees in India, and it is also said that the Dalai Lama has met with them each as they have fled and come to India. And yet he says, my religion is kindness. There you go. How is that possible? I just want to check for a second and make sure. How's the sound, Judy? Is that okay? And Bob, I know Bob, you were having, oh, Bob, maybe not here anymore. Anyway, is that okay? You hearing okay? Okay. Didn't want to be just talking to myself for all this time. I told you the last time I spoke a story that Ajahn Pasano tells about Bhante Gunaratana, who was going to teach in Europe. And just before he was to leave, the woman who was hosting him was speaking to him on the phone. And she said, you're not going to teach on that loving kindness stuff, are you? And actually, it's really one of the major things that Bhante Gunaratana does teach on. And it turned out that she had relatives who had been killed in the Holocaust, and that she just didn't want to hear anything about loving kindness toward the Nazis. It was just a reach too far for her. She said, I hate loving kindness. So, the very real difficulties, not only in this human life, but in our practice. Many of you know of, I'm going to read to you something also. Many of you know of Brian Stevenson. He is the lawyer who began the Equal Justice Initiative in Alabama. And he tells a story of crying on the phone in his final conversation with a man named Jimmy Dill, who was a client of his, who Brian was very confident was innocent, but who was about to be executed. And so he was speaking on the phone to Jimmy Dill on the night of his execution. And this is what Brian Stevenson says about that. He said, I thought about all of his struggles and all the terrible things he'd gone through, and how his disabilities had broken him. There was no excuse for him to have shot someone, but it didn't make sense to kill him. I began to get angry about it. Why do we want to kill all the broken people? What is wrong with us that we think a thing like that can be right. I tried not to let Mr. Dill hear me crying. I tried not to show him that he was breaking my heart. He finally got his words out. Mr. Bryan, I just want to thank you for fighting for me. I thank you for caring about me. I love y'all for trying to save me. When I hung up the phone that night, I had a wet face and a broken heart. The lack of compassion I witnessed every single day had finally exhausted me. I looked around my crowded office, and suddenly I didn't want to be surrounded by all this anguish and misery. As I sat there, I thought myself a fool for having tried to fix situations that were so fatally broken. It's time to stop, I thought. I can't do this anymore. Lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. We all know these places. We have each encountered them today. Even though I promised to speak again about kindness, I realized that I had some real reservations about teaching about it, because I run the risk, and I think we run the risk of it being too simple-minded, or our being too simple-minded, my being too simple-minded about it all. You know, that we can kind of think about kindness glancing along the surface, making it some kind of easy, comfort, nice thing that we're supposed to do, or that we do, or that we impose, some soft, sweet, passive, dull state of niceness that we're supposed to kind of contort ourselves into pretzels in order to actually accomplish. Especially when we start thinking about, you know, kindness for all beings everywhere. Oh, really? And, you know, I started to think that if we don't have questions like the woman in Europe asked Bhante Gunaratana, if we don't have questions about the teaching on kindness, on loving kindness, and if we don't have questions about how it is to unfold in real life, in my real life, in this real life, in reading today's newspapers, listening to today's news, encountering today's challenges, if we don't have questions, if we don't want to say, no, I really can't do that. I don't want to do that. I refuse to bring kindness to that. If we don't have those kinds of questions, I would propose we're not paying attention. I include myself in that we. If we're not confused, if we're not troubled by it, we are either enlightened, possibly, or we're kind of wasting our time, if you will, trying to be kind. So I wanted to dig into it a little bit more, and maybe in the light of the chant we were doing, is to dig into the muck of it a little bit more tonight, and to kind of think a little bit more deeply and give some permission, if you will, to a bit more spaciousness around this notion of kindness, which is indeed, as the Dalai Lama says, my religion is kindness. It is indeed the heart of our practice, but it's not a simple, soft, sweet, passive, dull state by any means. So I wanted to pause here and ask you to contemplate a bit. you know, like the woman in Europe, and like Brian Stevenson, would you contemplate, and we'll ask you to do it in groups. If you don't want to join a group, then don't. You can just wait and come back and contemplate on your own. But I invite you to contemplate in groups, like Brian. Where are the places where you say, I hate loving kindness? I can't, or like Brian, I can't do this anymore. You know, no matter, you know, how many times I've done a loving kindness practice, this is a place where it's beyond me, and I maybe don't even want to try. And again, I would propose that's really the place of inquiry for us each. And a couple people have commented in the chat group about being kind with ourselves. Sometimes, just sometimes maybe we might have trouble being kind with somebody else who has, you know, where we see that in ourselves, or we don't want to see that in ourselves, or seeing our own judgments. So being kind with ourselves, you know, how do we navigate when we might even see something that is like profoundly unskillful? So good. Please, please, please keep inquiring. If you're not confused, you are not paying attention. And a talk on kindness is a waste of time, because then it just becomes something you're sort of like trying to kind of paste on yourself, you know. So how do we navigate this fundamental teaching without it being something we're sort of like trying to become? And the Buddha teaches that, of course, all of these are very real dangers in life. You know, people who are racist and sexist, people who are causing harm, all of these issues that you're pointing to are real dangers. And then, the Buddha is saying that the real danger, well, he says we're like a traveler passing through a thick forest. I love this quote. Passing through a thick forest bordered by a swamp and a precipice. A swamp on one side and a precipice on the other, like a man swept away by a stream, seeking safety by clutching at reeds, like a person crossing a turbulent ocean, or someone pursued by venomous snakes and murderous enemies. And here he's not really speaking about the external lions and tigers and bears. He's speaking about the ways that we respond to those situations, and how to bring our practice, and inviting us to bring our practice right into that edge, which is really where the rubber meets the road. I want to read again this quote from John Lewis, and there's a little bit more to it that I wanted to read, because I wanted to talk a little bit about faith before we speak more about kindness. And the whole quote that I read to you part of at the beginning, John says, without our faith, we wouldn't have been able to succeed. On many occasions, before we'd go out on a sit-in, before we went on the Freedom Ride, before we marched from Selma to Montgomery, we would sing a song or say a prayer. Without our faith, without the spirit and spiritual bearings and underpinning, we would not have been so successful. And for myself, golly, this is like, I think a month or so ago, I found this quote, and I've been reading it practically every day ever since then. It's from Kabir Helminski, who is a Sufi teacher. He says, faith does not necessarily suggest belief in any doctrine. To be faithful is to have a single reference point. The lover will be faithful to the beloved. The mother will be faithful to her family. The real warrior will be faithful to his cause. To have faith means to have a center, an axis, a single point of reference. And yet this point of reference is not necessarily apparent from the start. It is not automatically possessed. On the contrary, the development of this faith will face many hazards and doubts because we are pulled in so many directions and are so easily distracted. I spoke in the last talk about our own and others' basic goodness as an orientation, as a kind of reference point. And John Lewis had faith. This is from his family, speaking about him, that he was a stalwart champion in the ongoing struggle to demand respect for the dignity and worth of every human being. He dedicated his entire life to nonviolent activism and was an outspoken advocate in the struggle for equal justice in America. And Taylor Branch, who was a historian of the civil rights movement and had known Mr. Lewis, said of him, he said his most distinguishing mark was steadfastness. He showed lifelong fidelity to the idea of one man, one vote, democracy as the defining purpose of the United States. And so John Lewis, the Buddha, like John Lewis, the Buddha teaches in the words of Bhikkhu Bodhi, he says, the guidance available cannot protect us from objective adversity. The guidance available cannot protect us from objective adversity. It can only safeguard us from the dangers of a negative response, from anxiety, sorrow, frustration, and despair. This is the only protection possible, and because it grants us this essential protection, such guidance can be considered a genuine refuge. So with respect to the story that Ajahn Pasano tells about Bhante Gunaratana, the woman felt that she was supposed to be something, but wasn't really looking with a kind of curiosity and inquiry into what does the teaching have to teach my heart and my mind about all of this. So she wasn't yet fully ready to investigate and to open and explore. You know, when the teachings, I read to you last time from the Buddha, I will abide pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. And in my view, when it's stated that way, it can seem like truly inspiring and incredibly annoying. And like the woman in Europe, you're not going to try to get me to do or be that in this situation, or maybe just intimidating. How can I possibly aspire to that when in my own experience, I'm just so far away from that. So, mindfulness or kindness rather is the ability and the willingness to cultivate a kindness to embrace in, I forget whose words it was, the whole enchilada. I think it may be John Kabat-Zinn. The mind wants to separate. The mind wants to say there's some bad people out there, there's some good people in here, or even there's some parts of me that are bad and some parts of me that are good. And I really tried to focus on that a bit in the meditation tonight of just really, can we be with whatever? And can we inquire into our capacity to be with whatever and not have to separate things out? How we consider ourselves even to be, relating to aspects of our own internal world. That's actually a whole other talk I'd like to give sometime about just working with that self-criticism and self-judgment. This is Brian Stevenson again, as he continued from the quote that I read to you earlier. He said, "For the first time I realized my life was just full of brokenness. I worked in a broken system of justice. My clients were broken by mental illness, poverty, and racism. They were torn apart by disease, drugs, and alcohol, pride, fear, and danger. They were broken by war, by poverty, by disability. In their broken state, they were judged and condemned by other people whose commitment to fairness had been broken by cynicism, hopelessness, despair, and prejudice. Before I knew it, I was talking to myself out loud. I can just leave. Why am I doing this? It took me a while to sort it out, but I realized that I don't do what I do because it's required or necessary or important. I don't do it because I have no choice. I do what I do because I'm broken too. My years of struggling against inequality, abuse of power, poverty, oppression, and injustice had finally revealed something to me about myself. Being close to suffering, death, executions, and cruel punishments didn't just illuminate the brokenness of others. In a moment of anguish and heartbreak, it also exposed my own brokenness. You can't effectively fight abuse of power, poverty, inequality, illness, oppression, or injustice and not be broken by it. We are all broken by something. We are all broken by something. We have all hurt someone and have been hurt. We all share the condition of brokenness, even if our brokenness is not equivalent. I desperately wanted mercy for Jimmy Dill and would have done anything to create justice for him. But I couldn't pretend that his struggle was disconnected from my own. The ways in which I have been hurt and have hurt others are different, but our shared brokenness connects us. So, like the Buddha, like Bhikkhu Bodhi in his quote, like Sharon Salzberg in her quote, Mr. Stevenson teaches us loving kindness. Andrew Holochek says, it's an amazing thing, this heart. When the heart is broken, it actually gets bigger. The expression of emptiness, he says, is love. The nature of reality is made of the fabric of love. Tanisaro quotes William James, and he talks about the different kinds of faith, and I won't go into them all, but he says there's a faith that, or the different kinds of truth rather, and there's a truth of the will. He says where it won't happen without your faith in it. Often in the face of unpromising odds, like John Lewis. If you don't believe that democracy will work in your nation, it won't. If you don't believe that demonstrating for civil rights will work, you won't demonstrate and it won't happen. If you don't believe that becoming a pianist is worthwhile, or that you have the makings of a good pianist, or that practice will help, it won't happen. Truths of the will are the ones most relevant to our pursuit of true happiness. Many of the most inspiring stories in life are of people who create truths of this sort when a mountain of empirical evidence is against them. In cases like this, the truth requires that faith actively discount the immediate facts. So how do we do this? Like Brian Stevenson or John Lewis or Ajahn Gunarantana or the Dalai Lama. How do we do this? We inquire and we practice. We can imagine that kindness is something that we need to inquire into. We can even Imagine that it's something you install from the outside into this unworthy container. But actually, that's not the teaching of Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum is the jewel is already in the heart of the lotus. Kindness is about discovery. And so the real curiosity can come up when we find ourselves not feeling kindness and being curious. What's clouding it over? What's obscuring it? Where am I now with respect to this? Indeed, even in our meditation tonight, where am I now? Where am I struggling to be kind with whatever it is that's arising? Again, we might have a whole talk about kindness to ourselves. One of my favorite quotes from Ajahn Chah, he says, in your practice, he says, don't think you have a 10-wheeler truck when you have a wheelbarrow. So part of kindness really is not addressing some of those circumstances as though somehow we're supposed to have a 10-wheeler truck of kindness, when really what we have is a wheelbarrow, or at times maybe even a thimble or a teaspoon, directed wherever it can go, whatever is available to us. So we can practice kindness wherever and however, and we can practice remembering kindness wherever and however it's available to us. Let me see if, I'll go with this, and then we're getting close to the end. And I want to read to you because it has inspired me a little bit in some kind of simple practices of kindness. And it's a quote from we don't know who. Sometimes I just wanted to stop. Talk of COVID, protests, looting, deaths, brutality. I lose my way. I become convinced that this new normal is real life. But then I meet an 87-year-old who talks of living through polio, diphtheria, Vietnam, protests, and yet is still enchanted with life. He seemed surprised when I said that 2020 must be especially challenging for him. No, he said slowly, looking me straight in the eyes. I learned a long time ago to not see the world through the printed headlines. I see the world through the people that surround me. I see the world with the realization that we love big, that we can be kind. Therefore, I just choose to write my own headlines. Quote, husband loves wife today, close quotes. Quote, family drops everything to come to grandma's bedside, close quotes. He patted my hand, quote, old man makes new friend, close quotes. His words collide with my worries, freeing them from the tether I had been holding tight. They float away. I am left with a renewed spirit. My headline now reads, quote, woman overwhelmed by the spirit of kindness and the reminder that our capacity to love is never ending. So I was thinking we don't really have time. I didn't leave enough time. I wanted to do some groups and have some headlines for today, on faith or the investigation of kindness. And I was writing a few of my own. Quote, friends bring food to hurting family. Quote, woman allows supportive friend to hear the truth of her confusion and distress. Quote, friends listen to one another, neither knowing what to do. And I would invite you to practice writing some headlines. So the invitation, I think, is to be with those places of confusion and stress and inquire. not to change it, not to think we have to have a 10-wheeler truck, but to see where we could bring just a thread, just a hair, just a tiny bit of sitting with, a tiny bit of care, a tiny bit of kindness. And from that place, we can really begin to see that we don't have to fix the world. We don't have to fix ourselves. We can be with it. And then, like John Lewis, oh golly, I wanted to end with a John Lewis quote. Let me find one here. Oh, here is a perfect one. It is not enough to come and listen to a great sermon or message every Sunday morning and be confined to those four walls and those four corners. You had to get out and do something. That was from John Lewis. And so kindness, I would propose, no matter what the circumstance, no matter where it's directed, maybe the best we can do is bring a sliver of kindness to ourselves when we can't bring any kindness to anybody or anything else, and we're just being yucky and miserable. But this is something I can do. And this is something I can do for the healing of the world. So, enjoy, have fun, write nice headlines.